Okay, today's project here was a suggestion from a customer. And basically what they want to do is they have this little bitty image here. I really can't expand it too much because you'll see it pixelates a lot. But they saw this somewhere online and they asked me how they can replicate this. And I said, okay, this is no big deal. What they want to do though is they want the word this, the letters are going to be made out of 1/2-inch Baltic birch. And the word this needs to be 17 inches wide by 13 inches tall in that realm. So I went online and I looked around to try to find a font that there was a match to this, and I found one that was very, very close. All the letters matched up except for the H. The loop on the H on the font I have comes down a lot lower than it does here. Now, my thought is perhaps they're using the same font and they just went ahead and did some node editing to modify the loop on the H to make it look this way. But for what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to basically focus on making the words this. I will not do the is and us. It's the same procedure, but we're just going to focus on this. And we're going to use the font that I have as it is. I might do another follow-up video to show how to modify that loop, but for the purpose of this video, we're gonna make the word this look like it is here as close as possible. So first thing we need to do, create a new file. We're going to create the width 17 inches, the height 13 inches, 1/2-inch thickness, and we're going to set our Z0, which is where we're going to touch the tip of our tool to our material surface, and then we're going to zero it on the CNC. We're going to set our XY datum to the center, so you'll just have to make sure if you have a board that's 17 by 13, you're going to want to take a tape measure and make a little mark in the middle, and that's going to be where you're going to put your tool and then zero all off of that. We're also, okay, so we're going to hit OK. Now the next thing we're going to do here is, it's really simple actually. The font is called Deliciously Regular. So the easiest thing to do would just be to type this. It was all small letters. So we're just going to type that. We're going to click bold because I want to thicken it as much as possible. And the text height we can make, again, we wanted 17 inches. So we're going to go ahead and type that. And as you can see here, it's we have exactly that. Now, a couple things. This is actually at 17 inches. It's going to be a little too high, so because you can see that it's actually outside of the boundaries of what we have set here. So, but we're going to forget about that for a second. We want to go back to this little drawing here, and you can see the H, the I, and the S look good. I think they look pretty similar, other than the loop being huge on this H and it's smaller on this one. But the T is what I'm concerned about. The T here is actually above the bottom of the H, and right now the T here sticks below. So we're going to try to fix that. And the easiest way to do it is going to be, we're going to take this, we're just going to do T and hit apply. And that's just going to give us the T, just the T. And we're going to do that separately. Then we're going to click away from the T so this turns black. And we're going to type the HIS. And then we're going to click apply. And now, so now I've got those letters all connected right here. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to modify the size of the T to get it down so that it's going to connect similar to that in this picture. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click and scale this down to where it looks like it's a little, okay, I want to shorten it this way too. Okay, so I want to shorten it both ways. Now if I move that in, I could see it's above here, which is good. It's what we wanted. And the only problem with this now is you could see the thickness here of these arms on the T are a lot thinner because I shrunk it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to try to fix that. And the easiest way to do it is basically select the T, go over here to offset, and we're going to offset this, let's say 0.05, and we're going to outwards. We're going to offset it outwards so you can see it. Now if I zoom in, you see it made a duplicate T basically that's a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do is select the inner lines that we have, and then so they turn purple, and just hit the delete key. Okay, so now you can see my arm thickness here is very close to what it is here, and I think this will match much better. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click the T, and we're going to use the arrow keys just to move this in. Now what I'm trying to do here is I need this all to link together, okay, because we're going to cut it out on the CNC. So there's if I leave a gap here, then what's going to happen is the bit's going to come in, and then the only thing that's going to be holding the T on the rest of the letters is this little area here. So I want to make sure I'm connected at least 2 points. So I'm going to move this over until the T just merges in like that. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click away. Now the other thing I need to do is when you see this purple line, that means everything is grouped together. When you create text, that's exactly what it does. It groups it together. So you're going to select it so it's purple, then right click, and then click convert to curves. All right, so now now you can see everything is purple dashed, which is exactly what we want for the rest of this. Okay, so now what we need to do in order to create this, see how it's all blended together, and all we want to do is cut out the spaces that you see that are white here. We want to leave the black and cut all the white out. So in order to do that, I have to get rid of some vectors, and I have to kind of link everything together so it looks nice and smooth. Easiest way to do that is click on this scissor tool. Now I can come over here and I can see that I don't need this inside vector, right? And I don't need this outside vector. And okay, so now you can see the two letters have kind of merged together, and it looks, you know, it's all one now. Problem is there's this little bump here which I want to be a little smoother. So what we're going to do is hit undo twice, and we're going to double click on the T, and we're just going to move it over a little bit more, and we're also going to rotate it slightly like this. Okay, and that should take care of that problem. So now we're going to go back to the scissor tool. We're going to click on, want to make sure we select the right vector. So we're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on this little gap here. We're going to click on this, and again, make sure you select the right vector. So now you can see that the T is now blended right in with the H, okay? So now we're going to keep doing that. We're going to look at all the other vectors. Everything looks good. Okay, now we get to the I. Same deal here. We're going to click on that and this so that the I is now part of the H here. Then we're going to do the same thing over here, okay, with the S. So now you can see all these letters are all one vector, all combined together, all right? The only issue we've got now is the dot for the I, because this will be cut out as a separate piece, and we need to blend it in. And you can see here they kind of merged it in. There's like a little tag that connects the two. So this is pretty easy to do as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to double click on the I, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees, and we're going to make it a little wider like this. Now all we're going to do is we're going to move it down using the arrow keys until it just touches and overlaps the top of the I. We're going to go back to the scissor tool. We're going to zoom in a little bit so we can see this because the overlap is pretty small. We're just going to click these two like that. And now the I is part of the word. Okay, so now that we got the vectors all set up here, we should be able to click the outside, and you can see how all the lines are purple. That means they're all connected to one another except for the inner cutouts here, which is fine. That's what we want. What we're going to do is we're going to resize this. So we're going to select everything. Okay, and then we're going to, first thing we want to do is click this button here. This is Align Selected Objects. This is going to center it in your material. So you can see that we have a few vectors here that are outside of the material. So we're going to grab the corner, and we're just going to shrink this thing down a little bit. And then we're going to go back over here. We're going to center it again. All right, there you go. So now we're slightly narrower than the 13 inches, but we're just about 17 inches vertical, which is what we were looking for. Now, let's take a look at this one more time. Everything looks pretty good. here, one thing we may want to do is if you find that these legs here are too thin, okay, then we'll have to come back and select that vector and then do an offset again and make that larger. But I think it's going to be okay because we're talking about 1/2 inch material, and this is probably close to 1 inch wide here, so it should be plenty strong. All right, so now that we've got the vectors all set, the next thing we need to do is go over to our tool paths. So we're going to select the tool paths menu here, and it's going to slide out. I like to click this little pin. That keeps it on the screen, so I have both my drawing tools and then my project in the middle. Now the first thing you got to do with a CNC machine is always understand that you've got to cut from the inside out. So I can't cut this outside profile out first and then go back and cut the holes for the letters. It's not going to work. So what we're going to do here is we are going to select all of the vectors that we have to cut that we would consider holes. Okay, so that would be these two on the S, this big one on the H, and then this on the T. And we're going to go over to Toolpath Operations, and we're going to select Profile Toolpath. Now, given this is 1/2 inch thick material, we're going to want to use an 1/8 inch end mill because we have a lot of tight inside corners and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and select, let's see, 1/8 inch end mill. And depending on which machine you're using, if you're using, say, a Stepcraft D series machine, you might want to be cutting this at about 15 to 20 millimeters a second. If you're using a new Q series machine, you could be up to 70, 80, 90 millimeters a second. So we're going to set this on the side of caution to 15. Our RPM's probably fine at 12. Depending on what spindle you're using, the RPMs may not actually even work, because if you're using a manual spindle like our MM1000, you're going to set the RPMs with the dial on the spindle, and it's not computer controlled. But if you are using a computer controlled spindle like our HF500, then this is where you'll set the RPMs. Everything else is set here. Now our pass depth is set. We're going to remove 1/8 of an inch of material. Since this is Baltic birch plywood, 1/8 is okay. At that speed, you're not going to stress the bit out too much. So we're going to click OK there. And to cut down to a 1/2 inch, it's saying it's going to take 4 passes. Now, we also have to keep in mind that this material is a 1/2 inch thick. So we want to make sure we have a nice, clean bottom cut. Usually I go 10 thousandths over to make sure, and I have a spoil board underneath this material so I don't cut into the machine's bed. But what that'll do is that'll ensure that the top of the material is nice and clean and the bottom of the material is clean. If there's any difference in this material, like in the thickness, so if you're, say, slightly under a 1/2 inch on one corner and on the other corner you're a tad over a 1/2 inch, then the end mill won't cut all the way through, and you'll end up with this very thin piece of like paper holding it. It's just one more step you'll have to do for cleaning, which is kind of a pain. So to fix that, I usually go 10 thousandths under. That's going to send the bit down 10 thousandths below the bottom of the material. 4 passes is fine. Now, because these are holes, I want to cut out everything inside this vector. Okay, so I want to make sure here that I say cut on the inside of the vector. Then we're going to come down, and one thing you could do, depending on the material, sometimes I like to add tabs, so that way this doesn't break free. And then you'll have to come back in and cut the tabs out later and then sand it. What I'm going to try here, another solution that I have, is to use what I call an onion skin. And basically what that is it's going to cut down. Right now we're saying we have to do 4 passes. Okay, so if we click Edit Passes here, you can see that it basically took, and we're doing 1/8 inch per pass until we get down to 0.51. Now we could set a last pass thickness of, say, 20 thousandths of material and click Apply. It's going to create a 5th pass. Okay, so what's going to happen essentially is the cutter is going to come down. It's going to cut 1/8 inch passes for four passes, and then it's going to leave 20 thousandths of material left. Now it's going to come back and do the 5th pass just to remove that 20 thousandths of material. So why is this a benefit? Well, because 20 thousandths of material is nothing for an 1/8 inch end mill. And when you're cutting an 1/8 inch of material at a time and you break through that final cut, it's possible that the end mill or the last cut will move this piece and it'll cause it to hit or vibrate, or on a smaller pieces, maybe even shoot out of the machine if the spinning cutter touches it. But what I find is when you're using a onion skin of only 20 thousandths, the last cut is so minor that there's no stress on the end mill and there's no stress on the material. So what usually happens is that when you break through that last cut, this piece just stays in place. The end mill doesn't touch it, doesn't vibrate, because it's such a thin piece of material that you're cutting. So we're gonna use that method here, so we don't have to worry about any cleanup. So we've got that set to 5 passes, and we can name this whatever we want. So we'll call this inside holes, and we'll calculate. It's warning us here that we are set to 1/2 inch, and we're going to cut down to 51.51. And so it's just warning us that it's going to cut through and it could possibly damage the machine bed. So you should have a sacrificial layer underneath that. Click OK, and then we preview this. And now we can see if we double click these, we can see those are the areas that have been cut out. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Now we're going to go back to the 2D view. Now we're going to click the outside profile, and you'll see everything else is selected, but the 4 holes are now black. Okay, we're going to go back to the 2D profile toolpath, same depth settings, same end mill. We're going to do the edit passes again, and we're going to do same thing. We're going to set the last pass thickness to 20 thousandths. And this time, though, we want this vector is what we want to remain. So we want to cut outside that line. So we're going to select outside here. And we're going to name this outside cut. And we're going to click calculate. It's warning us again. We click OK. So now we preview this toolpath. And we double click the outside material. And we double click this little piece right here. And you could see that we have the letter this. Now, one thing I just noticed, I had to double click this little area that I guess I missed. Okay, so I didn't miss the hole, but what happened here apparently is that this area here was supposed to be cut out, which it was cut out, but the gap between here and here must be smaller than 1/8 of an inch. Because what happens is the software won't let the end mill go through a passage that doesn't that's smaller than the end mill size. So if I go over to the ruler here and I click from here to here, I can see that the distance is we're looking at 0.08 instead of 125. So that's exactly what happened there. The end mill would come in as far as it can go, and it created an extra hole there, which actually doesn't look too bad. If that's something you want to fix, then you have to go in and edit the nodes to make that gap a little bit bigger. But this works, and it's actually works out okay because this little area just strengthens this loop here. But if now if you send this off to the machine, you have your letter, your word that says this. Now in order to send this to the machine, you're going to come over here and you're going to select both of these tool paths. Because they're using the same tool, we can output them together. We're going to click the disk here to save the toolpath. We want to make sure this is checked, output all visible toolpaths to one file. We're going to select our post processor. So if you're using the new Q series machine, you'll want to use the Q post processor. If you're using a regular machine, you're going to want to use the UCCNC ARCS. And we're going to click save this to save this, and we're going to call this, we'll just call this and output it. Now we can take that file, run it over to UCCNC. We can set up our board. So we want to grab a piece of material that's 17 by 13, 1/2 inch thick, and we want to make a mark in the center, and that's going to be where we're going to put our end mill. So we're going to move X and Y, so the end mill's in the center of the board. We're going to lower Z using the page down key until it just touches the surface of the material, and then we're going to 0 all. And from there, you're just going to go ahead and start cutting, and you'll end up with this really nice wall hanging here as soon as it's done. So that's it for this lesson. If you have any other projects that you'd like to see done, please email us at info@stepcraft.us, and we'll be happy to take the time to design a project for you and walk you through step by step how to make it. Have a great day.